Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you here today, the folks who are with us in person, as well as the folks that are joining us virtually. I hope this week will bring you happiness, joy, and lots of love.
Thank you, Michael. And Phyllis will be coming forward with the announcements.
And again, hello, everyone. We have several announcements this morning. Tomorrow, which is Monday, April 4th, there's an Ethical Action Committee meeting at 7 o'clock. And anyone who wants to join that is welcome. We're glad to have more people in the house for that. Thursday, April 7th, from 7 to 7:30, join Brian with our Zoom Valley Vanguard Fitness. This week, you need a pillow and a mat for floor exercises. So check out our Valley Weekly website. I'm sorry, our Valley Ethical Weekly and our website for details and the Zoom link. Next Sunday, April 10th, our platform speaker is Tiff Ho. She's the Executive Director of Foundation Beyond Belief. It's a food scarcity project, and it talks about food insecurity as is the big program under the Beyond Belief Network, which was launched in 2021. So we look forward to hearing a lot more about that. Also next Sunday, our SEEK class will be in downtown Lewisburg during platform with their lemonade stand. They're collecting money from the sale of lemonade for the crisis in Ukraine. We will also have a special collection for the people of Ukraine here as well. Next, the following Sunday, April 17th, there is no platform, just so you know. We will miss everybody. And Sunday, April 24th, it will be a special program in honor and memory of our SBES member and vice president on the board, El Miller. We're doing a river cleanup. It's the Sunbury River, the Sunbury boat launch from 9 a.m. to noon. If you are interested in doing that, you need to let us know as soon as possible so we can get you registered. If you register by today, you can get a t-shirt. We just need to know what size. We can't think of a better way to memorialize the life of our dear friend El Miller than by participating as a community in a day of action. Following the cleanup, all society members are invited to join us afterwards from 1 to 3, where we gather here at the Heater Center for food and a very special platform in memory of our beloved El. Please RSVP to info@Susquehanna Valley Ethical Society by Monday, April 18th for the meal. That way we will have enough food for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Boy, do we have a lot going on in the month of April. The Susquehanna Valley Ethical Society is a community of all walks of life that learns and grows together through shared values, doing good, and nurturing the human spirit. We are a safe and courageous place in which members can build a community of friends, find inspiration and purpose, provide moral education for their children, celebrate seasons and life events, and clarify their world views. And now I'm going to turn things over to Olivia.
Can I share screen?
Yes, Olivia.
So we have I'm going to be sharing, or Carolyn made an image, a piece of art for us to reflect on ethical humanism. And then I chose 3 archetype cards to go off of that. Can you see?
Yes, we can see.
Oh, Carolyn, you want to talk about your piece?
Sure. Olivia asked me to make or have a piece ready for today. Um, so the piece that I created, I made this image through Procreate, which is a digital drawing app on the iPad. I've been learning to digital draw in lieu of not having a studio or a place to make physical work. So I've been trying to teach myself how to digitally draw. In this piece, I have tentatively titled The Veil, inspired by a couple of things, but the biggest inspiration is one of my favorite novels, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. He talks about the statue at his university. It's a book about a Black man who is seeking to get an education and kind of going through the barriers of being Black in the 18th century, no, 20th century, early 20th century. And it reflects a lot of what has been kind of gone through with the Black community within that time period, but a lot of it is still very, very relevant today. And so I kind of made that piece with the excerpt of his kind of plight of seeing the statue. And the statue kind of references another scholar, Booker T. Washington, who has a very famous line about the veil, and the statue kind of emulates this kind of veil being taken off of this statue or this person, and the veil kind of reveals like a ability to kind of shed those things that are kind of dark or creates what we call the struggle. And Booker T's line, which I have here in the background, it lifts itself up like an individual. It lifts others. A race like an individual lifts itself by others, and that's not the. I'm paraphrasing, but I think in the idea of humanism and cultural and ethical humanism, I think the biggest ideas that I get from being human or trying to find better or do better with my civil duties or just as a person in the community, having others help, being a community. You can't do anything by yourself. And leaning on to others and understanding each other is the biggest motif. So that's the piece I made here. And Olivia told me to enter a piece, so I brought this one here today.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yes, thank you for sharing. And then I chose 3 cards, and I hadn't even seen her piece yet. But the 3 cards, this is from my archetype deck. So I thought when we were talking about ethical humanism, so one of the human stories and human patterns are archetypes. And so the first, so these are like 3 kind of powerful cards to meditate on ethical humanism. The prayer, the card says it talks about every tradition, every human tradition has some form of prostration, bowing, getting humble, getting low, getting quiet. It talks about this ancient mantra. I don't know how to say it, but essentially it means I bow to the creative consciousness within. I bow to the teacher within. The card also says for thinking about prayers, when are we in a state of prayer and when are we not? A prayer leads us beyond our ego, from our little story to the big one. Up is a prayer a natural result of gratitude, surrender, or service. And it says to go deeper with the archetype of the prayer, asked to be of service. The vow says, think of the last promise you made. Was it to yourself or someone else? Has it been upheld or broken? It talks about how words and intentions have immense power, and reciting the vow activates eternal and unseen forces The ancestors bear witness, and laws of nature respond. Notice the vow you're living consciously and unconsciously. And to review your vows, recommit to a vow or create a ritual that signifies a closure of a vow. And maybe, and this card also signifies maybe you're underestimating the power of promises. The last card, which I only wanted to pick two, but this one I found popped out too. The other two are tools. The prayer and the vow as tools, archetypal tools. And the aletheia is an archetypal process. It's truth. And it has a Picasso quote. We all know that art is not truth. Art is a lie that makes us realize truth, at least the truth that is given to understand. And it talks about the resonance of our voice changes when we speak a falsity. And so practicing truth as a vibration. And this is a truth beyond the rational. It unveils the truth within ourselves. An act of truth can be a conversation, a gesture, a poetic act, a ritual that honors to unveil what's been concealed. And so, yeah, there's three kind of like archetypes, bigger stories to bigger patterns in human existence, human storytelling that can help us reflect on ethical humanism. At least I feel like these are more of processes to begin to move towards what even is ethical, what is ethical humanism and how to like achieve it or get to it. So yeah.
Thank you, Olivia, for sharing that with us. Of course, you can certainly put anything in the chat. Any thoughts, feelings you have with what Olivia has offered. And Jay will be expounding probably on some of those thoughts that Olivia shared with his talk today. And I will now turn things over to Anthony.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Olivia, for just walking us through this journey, right? In this community, we're moving and building, visualizing, and trying to understand what it is that we do here at SVES, both in the ethical and cultural humanism. And so what are some of these practices that we do in community? Well, I invite you to listen, to contemplate, and to take in. At the Valley, as an ethical culture community, each Sunday, each meeting, each time we gather, we deepen our sense of community, the meaningfulness of life, to shine light on the ideas with which we guide our choices, to give us courage to take the higher path, and to get to know one another over time, in appreciation of each one's unique and incompatible worth. And together, we work for a world where love and justice cross all borders. In a few simple lines, we affirm the worth and dignity and uniqueness of every human being. As we take that in, today, as we prepare to listen, hear, and ponder on the words of our consulting leader, Dr. Jay Hooper, I want to pose a question to us. What is humanism's response to culture? I'm going to put it in the chat. please feel free to unmute, speak. This exercise is a very quick one, so please do not necessarily take a long time. It's a quick in, quick out, and I'll turn it over to our consulting leader. So there it is in the chat. The parentheses and the S is an edit that I make. So please go right ahead.
Thank you, Anthony. Again, if someone in person would like to address that, or anyone on Zoom, please feel free to do so. What is humanism's response to culture?
Question.
Nancy is pondering. I hear Nancy saying, it's a very interesting question.
Very
She
thought-
goes.
Very thought-provoking.
Anyone here in the Zoom space?
Please feel free to unmute yourself.
Right ahead, Olivia. Please unmute.
Answer the question.
Yep, it's in the chat. Yep. What is humanism's response to culture? There should be a question mark there.
I mean, I think one response to culture is to embrace it, learn about it, to also critique it, question it, reflect on it, the story that it's telling, and then also definitely embrace it, or not. I don't know, I don't have the best words for it. I don't want to say embrace the changes of it, but embrace the changes of it and notice, study the changes of it, relate the changes of it to other human moments.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I've been thinking about this also, and knowing that culture changes. There's change. And I also see that humanism is going through a change. You know, the American Humanist Association is working through change with a new executive director who came and spoke with us a month ago. Ethical culture is going through changes. So are these changes that are occurring responding to changing culture? So I guess that's a question I posed to the question.
Can I?
Yes, Nancy, go ahead.
Can I just talk?
Yep,
Yes.
yep.
Oh, I was agreeing with what I was having trouble getting the words of Olivia, who is a word master, came up with some good ones in that I think humanism in general celebrates culture, tries to include all types of cultures. Think about all the cultures that exist on this planet. But she pointed out that humanism also critiques culture. Is a particular culture or a certain aspect of it lifting people up or holding people down? Not all aspects of culture are always positive. And so humanism considers that, weighs it, measures it, and lifts up those aspects of it that lift everyone, including nature in general, which is important to include as well, environmental considerations. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, everyone. Olivia, final thoughts.
Yeah, it also had me thinking about in terms of the critique, Toni Morrison's Playing in the Dark. She talks about how US literature speaks about Blackness. It's like a common theme in US literature to not talk about Blackness, but to talk at Blackness by using the symbols and words of the darkness, and how that is used to like show some transformation of the white character.
Mm.
Basically, she talks about how like, and also like what the Picasso type of like quote was saying, art is not like, culture is not the truth, but it's like a reflection of where we are. Um, so if y'all ever read that book, it's a great book by Toni Morrison, Playing in the Dark, and how we reflect off of, you know, the culture isn't truth. It doesn't have to be like, it's not going to always be like uplifting or anything, but I think it's like more about how a reflection of the culture, a reflection on the culture tells about us.
You, and I'll close with the words from Rick shared in our chat. To use my humanism to question cultural norms and use it as a learning and teaching tools. Thank you everyone for sharing your words, knowledge in this space, in our community. And this is not the last exercise, but I turn it up to our consulting leader, Jay Hooper.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see all of you. And I am really glad to be in this month of April with you, definitely to talk about being willing and able. I don't think that this work, this community can do anything unless we are willing and able. Willing and able is a call for us to examine our values, examine our capacity, examine our strength, examine our integrity to be together as a community. The framework here today of looking at willing and able is for us to examine what we have often called ourselves as a ethical humanist or ethical culture movement. I am inviting you to look a little bit closer and let us kind of move from the larger term to more of a concentrated view. This concentrated view I want to bring you into is called cultural humanism. Now, you would probably ask, what is the difference? Why are we doing another humanism? What is this humanism different than everybody else's? Does it have any relevance? That will be up for you to decide after I'm probably done. Because today I want to offer you a little difference in possibly engaging something that we have not necessarily talked about within humanism. We assume that when we use the term humanism, it is a blanket statement. As soon as we say humanism, everybody is on the same page. Everybody has the same mindset. Everybody approaches it and comes to it in the same way. We all believe that we, and maybe some cases in this space, we are not all non-theistic. Some of us are atheists. And then we kind of blanket it further that we are all agreeing with science and that we are all not agnostics. And we are also folks who only believe in rationalism. And that is the guiding principle of our movement. We can definitely hold true to the Enlightenment and all of the wonderful philosophers and sociologists that existed, right? I think that that is all perfectly humanism as we know it. And so I have been more concerned with not necessarily a ethical humanism or an ethical culture per se, but as I begin to think about the generative work that needs to happen, and I think about the shifts of what humanism is going through, I would like for us as the Valley to think about how equipped are we as humanists to engage culture? How equipped are we as humanists to engage cultures that are not necessarily based on just ethnic groups or language or sexual orientation, but actual formations that are taking place within time and space, actual formations that involve people developing and growing individually. The way that things that we knew it were happening are actually shifting. The way that we expected to engage in conversation, here we are hybrid, when probably a few months ago, we were all together in one building trying to find out where is the nearest humanist community where I can join. And now we are in a different culture where we can join technologically from all over. We have seen these shifts. Little by little, there are shifts that call us into a new way of being, a new way of becoming. And so I want to invite you to look at, not today, anything possibly with ethical culture, and I am not interested in changing anything regarding ethical culture. I want to put us in a bit of a discernment to examine how we engage culture. This talk is deeply inspired by Alain Locke. Alain Locke was the father, often known as the godfather of the Harlem Renaissance. I invite him in as an ancestor who was also was a young attendee of ethical culture. This young Black man, who was also queer or identifiably gay, had served ethical culture not in any capacity at all other than being a member. His mother, Mary, was a follower of Adler as very, very early. And she had lived, both her and Alain Locke lived in Philadelphia. Alain Locke's mother, Mary Locke, was a teacher. And they were a part of a particular kind of Victorian period, a Black Victorian period, in the times of which early Victorian folks like Adler were moving and speaking and giving lectures. Alain Locke was raised in this environment of Black Victorians in this country. I want to share with you the work of Dr. Jeffrey Stewart, and a brief snippet of a letter that Mary Locke writes to Alain. Writes the following. I got myself ready, she says, and went to the Ethical Culture Society at the Century Club to hear Professor Josiah Royce on race, questions, and prejudice. I went early and it was well. I did for it was so crowded, but such an audience with an exclamation point, she writes. Culture written in every line of their faces. Such an audience you would enjoy. Here is a Black woman just on the cusp of the 20th century, writing about ethical culture, a middle-class Black woman, a woman who is working in the school system in Philadelphia, trying to provide her son a healthy environment to be educated. Her devotion and following of Adler would lead her to also enroll Alain into an ethical culture school in Philadelphia. He would be educated and then later evolve into the first Black Rhodes Scholar and the first Black person to receive a PhD at Harvard University in philosophy. And I do recommend that you get familiar with his work if you have never. Culture written in every line of their faces. This is not 2022 when this is written. This is written in the 1800s. This is a moment where race and the question of racism and culture and how to do integration work, how to do integration between the ethnic groups, how to do integration between gender, all of this is beginning to bubble early. And for her to write about culture, what is she saying? What is she saying? I like what Dr. Jeffrey points us to, because we have to consider the time in which this is being written. That what we're seeing here is that Mary Locke is referring to the fact that culture was a vision of enlightened living. Enlightened living. And she had to have this enlightened living in order to raise her son. I want to point out that culture is also spelled in this case for Mary. She writes with a capital C. It is not lowercase. And she is not referring to ethical culture as a title. She is referring to culture in the general sense that many Black folks actually sought to escape the harshness of life and share in the experience to escape in white elitist spaces. They would have preferred to escape from the hardship of their current reality to engage in white spaces. And these were particular elitist white spaces. This is during the Gilded era. So you're also having a flux of money. And Elaine Locke was trained in classical music. Was very familiar with opera. Knew of various fine dinings. He lived in the city. And to be in such spaces said very well how one should perform to be cultured. Or did culture actually just necessarily mean white elitist humanism? Because she did understand this about this kind of space, that ethical culture, all of them were white within the membership at the time in the Philly Society. But the ethical culture's notion on economic, social, the social framework and the aesthetic framework were all interest. We're all at interest. The Philadelphia Society particularly was interested in a shared responsibility and fostering a life and a mind that would influence all of society, trade, and industry. Mary is referring to the fact that what is written on their face is the concerns of economic status, social status, and aesthetic status. This does not sound like our community at all at the Valley. But this is the history of our community as we know it. Hence why things have to change. Mary was writing because she understood that cultured spaces would inform and come hand in hand with a sense of survival for Black legitimacy, to be seen as human. Now, I didn't come to probably spend a lot of time talking about race or bring you into examining how to do racial work today. But I just wanted to give you an insight on how an individual comes to this moment of ethical culture, even on the cusp of the 20th century. I want you to hear that the history and the formation of the movement that existed then, even in its glory, still somewhat holds a lot of the same striking resemblance that honestly don't really reflect what's happening in the Valley. I love looking at my Zoom screen. I love seeing all of the various faces, and not just the various faces, but the various gifts. And I love seeing all of the various personalities and all the various thinkings and all of the various hearts and hands that come to this place. I think we're doing something different. I believe that we're cultivating something different. And I believe and can see by the things that we are exercising, we are not willing to lose ourselves for the sake of status, hierarchy, or overwhelming aesthetics that mean us no good. So when I sit here and offer you the work that we're doing, possibly we are doing cultural humanism together. And as I sit and I think about the fact that we have some amazing folks from various places in our nation, as well as within our community, that are working hand in hand to inform each other, there is such an amazing process regarding what can now be seen, not necessarily as a congregational humanism or community of humanists, but actually a cultural humanism. A cultural humanism. A cultural humanist, for me, is a bit different than what Mary Locke was experiencing. It doesn't have economics and social or political concerns written all over the faces. And it's not a means of survival. I can't bestow that onto this community. Because in the end, I do believe that we will have to do better together. And survival is not an option, but thriving is. Thriving in the sense of flourishing. Flourishing in the sense of paving new ways to think of how we can honor each other in achieving freedom together. Various liberties within our own humanity and within our responsibility of our families, our communities, and maybe our jobs, and possibly some legislation, and therefore the various things that we have yet to tap into, because we feel in some way the only way that I am going to get through this is if we thrive together. Cultural humanism is thriving. It's the thriving that requires for us to become willing and able to engage each other, and not just community, but a charge of accountability towards each other. I'm reminded of the book Beowulf as a small example of what the cultural humanist can do. Cultural humanism is very similar to the moment that Grendel experiences the Machen Stamper. The Machen Stamper is a kind of monster, if you will, often referred to in Beowulf. And the funny thing about this character is that they are known as, within the translation of the word Machen Stamper, as one who is a border walker. A border walker. It can also be loosely translated as border stalker, because both simultaneously had to happen. Stalking in the sense of one has to be very watchful, in addition to one has to keep on moving. That's a very interesting dichotomy, but if we merge them, they work very well together. You cannot go any further unless you have a future, or unless you have a vision. You've got to have good eyesight as well as a good stamina to keep going forward. And here, the cultural humanist is the matching stamper. The cultural humanist is the one who is always on the cusp, on the breaking edge, on the margins, and always treading on what seems to be good as well as sometimes uncomfortable and challenging. See, the matching stamper actually is not a character that has a home per se. I had to tell him myself, I said, wow, I must be this person. I have many homes and I have many spaces that I tread because I enjoy being the individual who can go from one space to another to find those who can be connected in community and realize the nuances of our behavior, our characters, maybe our language, maybe in some ways our customs, maybe our food, maybe is our hairstyles, maybe it's how do we bridge that? The matching stamper is a very good example of the cultural humanist because the cultural humanism knows how to assess the relationships and the benefits of those relationships, as well as the consequences of those relationships. The benefits we always look towards as optimistic and hopeful. But humanism allows for us to do the assessment work to say, is this logical for me? Is this the best practice for me? Where cultural humanism can see the fruitfulness in it as well, it can also offer us the insight of the consequence. The knowing it doesn't necessarily need to belong, but it needs to become. And that cultural humanism just gives us and those in this community one step closer to growing together. One step closer to envisioning together. There are those that we started off in with this community years ago, way before I came. They helped us get one step closer to where we are today. There are some folk who hold the narratives and the stories and the traditions of customs that used to exist when this community was existing and doing its flourishing early. They brought us one step closer. This is why it's important for us to think about culture, because in the words of Makoto Fujimura, who writes about culture care, he makes very clear that there are three things that happen with culture. Culture requires a genesis. Yes, don't clutch your pearls just yet. I'm not going religious on us. But I need to offer you a genesis not in the sense of just the beginning, but a genesis that actually uses the word cosmology, or a more friendlier term or layman's terms of creation. We always require creation. Cultural humanists require creation. That means that we have the audacity and the ability to call forth fruitfulness. To call forth fruitfulness. Creation is rooted in calling forth fruitfulness. When everything looks barren and done and dead, there we have the opportunity to say, come alive. The cultural humanist is always looking and seeking after the aliveness, calling forth the fruitfulness. But in addition to that, once the fruit has come alive, you get the opportunity to name it for yourself. You get the opportunity to not just call it forth, but to name it, to make it your very own, to purpose it for the autonomy and the collective freedom of those who can honor what you are growing. That is what creation does. That is the first part of the cultural humanist. The cultural humanist engages the conversation of generosity, a shared collective gratitude as well as graciousness. It is a grounding experience to affirm each other. We often share our mission and say that we will, of course, love to honor the inherited worth of each other, but may we just collectively sum that up as an act of generosity within the cultural humanist? Generosity is hard to find. It is becoming more scarce because generosity is caught in between the areas of hospitality, right? In addition to between the other area of also your gift and hospitality, so that in the end, between the two, you know how they are used and not abused, that you were taken care of by the affirmations of one's words or actions, in addition to that you were able to produce or ignite new experiences. It's very interesting how generosity works because it's not necessarily transactional as much as it's about shared. Generosity holds that space that also undergirds probably one of the most powerful things I see to be very important in cultural humanism, which is the generative. And here in our community, we are very generative. We are often engaged in generational complexities and conversations that allow for us to see the betwixt and the between spaces of time and space, as well as some of the spaces of those which are young and seasoned, from those who are also from various backgrounds and not always cut from the same cloth. It is generative because that is the way that we grow. Generative, from the words of Makoto Fujimura, he unpacks that the generative is rooted in our ability to take on customs that do not belong to them, to ourselves, and reinvent them to help us do better. Ooh, that's tough. It's tough when I think about it as a person of color. I have to be honest with you, because all the things that I've seen within particularly some aspects of our culture, I have to say have not always fueled into the best practices for my community. I'm sure for those in the working class white communities, that has not always worked in the best practice either, when we think about sometimes very progressive and liberal ideas regarding work ethics or expenses or economics, particularly the gas prices. Yes, I went there as someone who loves to travel, right? There are these factors. There are these factors. But when we are generative, we still have within that generative application of cultural humanism, pardon me, is that we need to arrive once again to humanism to help us ask the questions. The humanism helps us ask the questions so that we do not lose our sight on who we are in the company of others. The humanism asks us to ask the question and charge those around us to take responsibility for their actions. The humanism in us requires for us to do the discernment and the assessment possible to know what is our capacity and will we lose ourselves based off of someone else's practice. This is tough. But cultural humanism attached to it allows for us to respond with also integrity, to say, I see what you do. And even if I do not agree, I'm willing to walk alongside you. I'm willing to see you in your experience and hold your story. And I will not call it false. And I will not say that I do not believe in it, because I do believe in your humanity. And I believe that what brought you here today is the experiences and the stories that I was not attached to. That's really tough for some of us because we need to figure out how many ways to read ourselves through other people's trouble to understand them. We bear not get too close, because if we get too close, we're getting too relational. Maybe we're just not needing to get too relational. We actually need to get cultural. We need to actually begin to tread that border and see with a very clear vision of who we are when we walk alongside. You've probably often heard me use the phrase by Howard Thurman that says, "I want to be me without making it uncomfortable to be you." Want to be me without making it uncomfortable for you to be you. I think it's so applicable to this moment again. And I find it to be very interesting that the call to be in a cultural humanism is this constant need to be in assessment and in relationality of that assessment with each other. To constantly evaluate how we show up and how others show up for us. Cultural humanism does not create an idealistic view, which is why I do often have to be very careful when I use the word ethical. Because the first thing I lean into is, or hear often in some people's spaces when I'm shared with some of my colleagues, we hear the word ethical. And it's like, that's not ethical. We use it from a place of reproach, as if there's something better. It almost creates a complex very similar to our early Mary Locke, who thought it was better just because it was white. Never realizing that there was something beautiful probably resting within her own culture. And as early assimilation was going on for a lot of Black Americans trying to survive in a culture that was predominantly white, Mary Locke had a very skewed view of what it meant to have a valuable culture that spoke to the culture that she also was, that spoke to the ancestors that she came from, that valued maybe some of the food she liked. I'm sure Mary was cooking collard greens and bacon like everybody else. But in ethical culture, we don't eat bacon. We're all vegan. We're all high protein folk, like, we're all high, vegetarian folk, and I get it and I respect it. But if that's not somebody's culture, that's okay. Like, I love you, guy. Look, right? This is the very unique thing. That is our space about hopping on the bandwagon and creating spaces where you belong. I can tell you, as someone who has often ate various kinds of food, I'm gonna call her out. Jessie has the most amazing vegan dishes I have ever experienced in my life. Now, do I know how to cook them? No, I do not. Was it a cultural experience for me? Indeed, especially for my stomach. But I loved it. Is it something that I could practice at moderation based off of my own capacity and knowing what's available to me? Would I be willing to train myself in it? This is the cultural humanist practice. I'm willing to practice and train myself. Guess what? I evolved. I was recently telling somebody, even recently, I'm a pescatarian. They were like, what? It's like, yeah, more, yeah, fish, bit of vegetables. And I'm quite sure some folk who know me in this room know I can throw it out on a piece of steak. I can throw on some pork. I can throw down. I got some good smiling faces. But the truth of the matter is that I've been able to push myself to engage aspects of my humanity and my community to inform my growth, my becoming. And I don't lose myself. You know, I went to somebody's house. I went to somebody, a dear friend of ours house, and they were like, "Oh, I thought you ate meat." I said, "No, I'll take a portion. I'm fine. It's okay. No worries. You don't have to change your whole entire menu for me." But I was still able to be respectful and affirm their skills in cooking. I was like, this is really good too. And I'm a foodie. Anybody knows me, knows I'm a foodie. I love food. I love trying new places. But I find that it is that experience. It's those kinds of experience that inform my need to explore how we in our own community, we are not those elitist spaces. Our noses are not so far up in the air that we don't want to see each other. But we are doing something different here. I'm getting I'm getting geared up and equipped to go on a river walk. Now, I have never been on a river walk a day in my life. When I was a little kid, I didn't really like to get my shoes dirty. If anybody knows me, I don't like barbecue on my ribs. I only like seasoned stuff, so I don't like to get my fingers messy. But I'm gonna have this shared experience of walking on this river, hoping I can walk on water. I might need a little Jesus moment. But in the end, to think about that, to have that, to not turn my nose up at it, to not also shut down because something is different from me, but to be willing and able to get rid of my screen door when I should have an open door and do my best to engage the best part of our humanity together. That is the cultural humanism. It is embodied. It is relational. It gives us the ability to name each other and name each thing that we do and call it forth. It gives us the opportunity to be generative and also hold generosity. Come on, you'll take the sauce. I hear you. And maybe just for a moment, we'll kind of be very mindful when we use the word ethical and lean harder on our cultural humanist aspects of our humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Hey, we do have a little bit of time for some responding. I do want to ask Mike, I need you to go ask Jesse if the children are ready to share
Okay,
a little bit here. And so in just a moment, the kiddos from our children's education class are going to join me here and talk about the project that they are working on for next Sunday. And then anyone who wants to stay on till about 2:45 is when we typically close. Then we will have some questions, thoughts of the program today.
they'll be here in a minute.
They're going to be here in a minute. Okay, maybe at this point, Jay, do you have some thoughts that we could maybe kind of
Ponder.
guide us guide us on what kind of discussion we might have later, or maybe a
Yeah, I mean, what we can ponder right now is just think about, I would find that we go back to Anthony's question as very helpful to how does humanism respond to culture? And I think let's just add that's the A question, but the B question underneath that is how are we allowing for culture to inform our humanism?
yeah.
How are we allowing for culture to inform our humanism?
Great, okay, great. So keep that, think of that thought, and kiddos, here they come.
Yeah,
I'm going to get out of the way here. All right,
right.
you come on over here,
Come on, colorful outfit.
over here. Okay, let me get out of here. All right.
I love that.
Valley Preschool up to? We're making lemonade stands. And why are we doing that? To save up money to give money to Ukraine. Yes. And what should people do if they want to contribute? Where are we gonna be and what are we? Oh, we're gonna be in the park. We're gonna sell pins. You can buy a pin. You can buy a mask decorated with Ukrainian colors. And you can buy a glass of lemonade. And all the money will go to help the displaced Ukrainian people. Anything else you all want to say about what we've been up to? You want to see all these buttons that were designed? Look at these designs. Does anyone have any questions?
How did you guys decide to come up with doing a lemonade stand for Ukraine?
How did that happen? Yeah, Lily, tell me.
We were thinking about what to sell, and then we saw lemonade because Ukrainian is yellow and blue, so and yellow lemonade.
Very good. Thank
And
you.
we're gonna put blueberries in it.
Okay.
That's gonna be very special. Blueberries in the lemonade. Yum.
So come on down.
Can I just say to you amazing, like y'all are amazing young troopers. And I really, y'all are so creative. And thank you for thinking about that. That was such a creative idea of thinking about the blending of like lemonade and this idea of like it having the flag colors is yellow and blue and the water being blue and the lemonade being yellow. And like, y'all are really actually turning a sour moment into something refreshing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing that. That's the work that you do. You refresh us and you're refreshing that country. And thank you so much for your work.
Yes, thank you, kids. And I want to tell you that next Sunday, the adults here are also going to be donating to your lemonade.
Thank you so much. All right, you can wave hi to the camera on your way by if you want. Not everybody.
Be you. Be good, y'all. Be good. Be good. Have fun. Whoever has on the hot pink sweater, I want it.
There we go.
Love you, honey. Bye.
Don't forget mommy's water bottle.
Oh,
It's right there on the table. Turn around.
mommy's water bottles right there on the table. There we go. Okay. All right. So that was sweet. That was sweet. Okay, we're opening it up. We have about 10 minutes.
We want to stop the recording possibly.
Yes, we do. Thank you.